The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dina Williams, and I'm the Deputy Director of Recruitment and Selection for the Broad Residency in Urban Education. So thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar. Excited to see so many of you who are interested in our program and in a career in education. So I hope that you get a lot out of this session. So before we begin, I want to cover a few logistical items. If you've dialed in by phone, please make sure that telephone is clicked here. See where my mouse is. Otherwise, we'll receive feedback from your computer mic or your speakers. A couple other things to cover. Everyone on this call will be muted during the webinar. We do have a lot of people on the call, which can lead to quite a bit of background noise, so we have to mute everyone. But what that means is that we're not going to do any live Q&A during the webinar. However, over here in the question box, we will be taking questions. So I do have a couple of the team members online who will answer questions directly, and as well they'll flag a few if they see ones that really are applicable to the larger audience. They'll flag them, and we will take them live at the end of the session. As well, if you do get dropped, just dial back in and you'll be fine. But we are aware that some of you may not be able to see us because that means that your software did not download correctly. Unfortunately, that's something that we can't fix, and it does happen to a few people each time, so hopefully that's not the case for you. All right, well, let's get started. So as I mentioned, my name is Dina Williams. I'm Deputy Director of Recruitment and Selection for the residency, and I'll share a little bit about my background to get us started, just so you know a little bit about who I am. So I actually started my career in investment banking and corporate finance. I worked at Disney for several years, and while I really enjoyed the analytical work and sort of working on these big problems, I didn't feel as though the work I was doing was really impactful. I didn't get a lot of, I wasn't passionate about it, and I just was looking for something different. So I went back to business school. I'm really trying to figure out how to take my career in a different direction, do something, find work that I was more connected with, and after business school landed after a few years in MBA admissions. So I was an admissions officer at UCLA Anderson and the Kellogg School of Management for several years, for about over 5 years, and just found my calling. I loved recruiting, loved working with candidates and students, and really helping them figure out sort of what they were looking to do and how I could help to facilitate those goals. And in particular, my role was diversity recruiter. So really trying to make sure that we had really diverse classes for both programs. And one of the things I was very frustrated by, however, was the number of minority students in those schools just never seemed to grow. We would go and I'd partner with other admissions officers, and we'd go to various college campuses. We would go to find different professional groups to speak with, and just the number, like I said, it just never moved. And the more I looked at it, the more I thought about it, realized that the problem was at K-12. Not enough students coming out of these urban school systems were getting access to a quality education that would put them on the path to successfully finish high school, even fewer to go on to think about getting through college, and such a small percentage who are able to even consider applying to some of the elite programs in the U.S. for graduate school. But certainly sitting there at Kellogg, there wasn't much I could do about that. But when I learned about the residency, I had friends who had been residents, and when I got one of those emails, I'm sure that you got, that sort of talked about this experience, it clicked something for me. I had my light bulb moment and realized that here was an organization where I could continue to do the work that I enjoyed so much, recruiting, but now I could actually make an impact in a way that made a difference for me. And I was able to do something about that K-12 bottleneck. So I'm hoping that through this webinar, you'll get a sense for how you can also use your work and use your skills and talents to make an impact here. My transition has been amazing, has been a really great experience, and I'm excited to share with you how you can also find a way to pursue something that you can also be passionate about. So here's what we're going to cover today. So we're going to start off with a pretty high-level overview of the crisis in education, just to set the stage. I know that many of you are currently working outside of education, so I'd like to start off by giving you a little bit of context for this work. Then I'll talk a bit about Broad and who we are. As well, then I'll talk about the Broad residency, the selection process, and then, as I mentioned, we will take some live Q&A at the end of the session, and our Managing Director, Chaka Booker, will join us at that time for the live Q&A. So to get us started, I'll share a few facts. So I'm going to put a poll here, and I want everyone, if you wouldn't mind, just take a moment to answer this question. Okay, you should see it now. What percentage of American 8th graders are unable to read at grade level? So just take a moment, log your response, and then we'll see sort of how savvy you guys are about what's going on in this space, and maybe I'll enlighten you a bit. So I'll give it a couple more seconds, and I'll close it and show the poll. Okay, I love seeing some of you so attentive today. I love it. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now, and I'll share it out. So most of you said about 50%, 47% of you thought that 50% of American 8th graders were unable to read at grade level, and that would actually be an improvement. The real statistic, I'm going to go ahead and close that. Okay. So the actual reality is that 70% of American 8th graders are unable to read at grade level. And this isn't just in urban areas. This is nationwide. And the frightening thing about this is that these students will never catch up. Reading is a basic skill, and in many ways a basic right. And it's something that our public education systems are currently not providing for our students. And it's having a huge impact on those students' futures. As you can imagine, if you cannot read well in our society, you will struggle in college. And even if they don't go on to college, they would struggle in the workplace. If you look at this from a global perspective, American students compared with students in 30 other industrialized nations rank 25th in math. And in science, we rank either 14th or around 23rd or so, depending on the ranking. Either way, we are either at the bottom or barely average. For a country as advanced as ours and with as many resources as we have, this is unacceptable. And these are statistics that really worry corporate America because our students are our future workforce. And if our students are behind, then that means our workforce is behind. In particular, they're behind in math and science, which are so critical for us being competitive in a global economy. Another statistic that cannot be ignored is the dropout rate. Over 1 million students drop out of school each year. If you look nationally, that dropout rate is 30%, but in many large urban communities or even large cities, that dropout rate climbs to 50%. And this has a devastating impact on the lives of those young people, but not just on them, also their families, the communities, and society at large. And we know there's a direct correlation between the dropout rate and decreases in physical and mental health, increases in crime and incarceration, increases in poverty. I think that you get the picture. You see this is something that has to be addressed. So the issues in public education are a huge crisis in our country. And I'm sure something, as you're aware, something that got a lot of attention during this election season. And it isn't something that we can wait to address. We're feeling the impact, and things will only get worse if we don't address these issues now. Well, there is some good news. There's a lot that's going on right now in education reform to make things better. And I'll go through the next few items relatively quickly, but certainly I encourage you to take notes and look up anything that you'd like to learn more about. So here at the ground level, we have organizations like Teach for America, New Leaders for New Schools, that are working on finding and developing stronger teachers and principals. And these are the people that are on the ground working every day with students and their families. We also have organizations like KIP, which is a National Charter Management Organization that's trying new models for education. EdLab is an organization out of Harvard that's pushing innovative and often controversial ideas about how to get children to learn. There's some pretty interesting stuff going on here. Some things you'll agree with, some things you won't, but we certainly need people who are willing to test the limits and try out new ideas. At the top level, at the federal level, we have Arne Duncan, who is the current U.S. Secretary of Education. He was formerly a superintendent of Chicago Public Schools and is very progressive. He's trying new ideas and pushing change from the top. And one of those ideas that's being implemented at the state level is the Race to the Top. And this is an initiative that looks at the levers to improve the environments within which our districts operate. So definitely I would advise you to look online to learn more about this really important initiative. So there's also leaders at the local level who are working hard for improvement. We have people like Deborah Gist, who is the state superintendent in Rhode Island, Robert Avosa, the superintendent in Fulton County Schools in Georgia, Rahm Emanuel, the mayor of Chicago, and Cory Booker, the mayor of New York. These are some of the unsung heroes who are pushing on the status quo, and they often take a beating for it, but they're really courageous to say that we have to do things different and try different approaches. As well, the media has begun to pay more attention to education, which really helps. Waiting for Superman is a film that many of you have heard of and hopefully have seen, and then there's the recently released film, Won't Back Down. These films are important because they get people talking about the real issues in public education, and they highlight different points of view on how to reform these systems. On top of that, there are others with the resources and influence to support and try new ideas in education. Sal Khan of Khan Academy has introduced a new model for blended learning, which has certainly gotten the attention of educators and parents. And people you're likely familiar with, like Bill Gates and Michael Dell, who work on education reform through their foundations, and also, of course, Eli Broad, the founder of our foundation. So this is the good news. This is what makes it an exciting time to enter this work. There's a lot of momentum and resources being dedicated here during a time when we have a chance to turn things around for those kids who, through no fault of their own, are not getting the education that they really need and deserve. So let's talk for a moment about Eli Broad, because he's the person on the screen who you likely know the least about. So Mr. Broad was born and raised in Detroit, comes from working-class roots and immigrant parents, and as a youth he attended Detroit public schools. He later went on to attend Michigan State University, so throughout his education he's a product of our public education system. He is an accountant by trade and joined an organization called Kaufman & Holmes that later became Kaufman & Broad and later became KB Homes, which many of you have, I'm sure, heard of. He grew that into a Fortune 500 company, sold it, and made his first billions. He then started another company, Sun America, which is an insurance company that later merged with AIG and made several billion more with that sale. So without a doubt, we can all agree that Mr. Broad has been financially successful, and this has been due to his business savvy and as well his leadership. He has always been heavily involved in the arts and is very well known in this space, with the Broad Contemporary Art Museum here in Los Angeles that's named after him. However, as he looked beyond the art world and he reflected on his own upbringing, that journey took him right back to Detroit and to the Detroit public school system, a system that currently has a 50% dropout rate. And he realized that this system that was so integral to his success story, so important to his background, was in no way providing the same level of education for children today. So he decided this would be the area that he'd focus on. So in 1999, he created the Broad Foundation to focus on new ideas and innovation and leadership in public education. And to date has dedicated about $450 million to this work. I personally find this admirable. He could be doing anything else with his time and his money, but he's in the office every day in a suit and a tie, working on issues that face children who at one time he had so much in common with. Let's talk briefly about the Broad Foundation before I start talking about the Broad Residency. So the Broad Foundation, as I mentioned, was founded in 1999, and it was founded with the focus on education reform. Over the years, the foundation has invested in many areas, including policy, teacher training, unions, scholarships, charter schools, and management. And management is an important area to note because very quickly the foundation realized that it doesn't make sense to just give money to organizations if they don't have a strong pool of people inside those organizations to effectively use the money. So in 2001, they created the Broad Center for the Management of School Systems. And the Broad Center believes that if we recruit top talent, place them in high-level roles in education organizations across this country, support them with training and professional development, they will be able to build a nationwide network of leaders who will transform these systems and raise student achievement. That's what we're all about. That's why we come to work every day and focus on this work. And we run two programs to accomplish this goal. The Broad Superintendent's Academy, which is very similar to the residency, except here we train senior leaders who are ready to take on CEO or superintendent positions. And then the Broad Residency, which I'll talk about next. So the Broad Center is a separate 501c3 organization, fully funded by the Broad Foundation. And this relationship has been really powerful for us because it means we don't have to do any fundraising. There's no one on our team who works on fundraising. We have no development office. And that means that every person on our team, every person in our organization is completely focused on the leaders that we train and the children that we serve. And that stability and that focus has allowed us to do some pretty amazing things over the past few years, and we're lucky to be in such a position. So now let's talk more about the Broad Residency, which you're all interested in applying for. So the Broad Residency is a 2-year leadership development program, and we place our residents in school districts, charter management organizations, and federal or state departments of education. Our residents work in full-time roles in central operations, and in those roles, they're reporting to either a top executive and in many cases the superintendent of that organization. So they're engaged in very high visibility work, and that gives them an opportunity to have a greater impact across the organization. So they're getting into the right organizations at the right level. The salary is $85,000 to $95,000. And what we provide is structured support through quarterly professional development sessions, personalized leadership training, and access to a nationwide network of leaders in education. And upon completing the program, residents continue to explore many exciting opportunities in this sector. So let's talk a little bit about where our residents work and the types of organizations. So in 2003, when we started the Broad Residency, we began placing residents at large urban school districts. Since 4 out of 5 students in the U.S. are educated in public schools, we decided this was a place where we could place residents and we knew that they would have a large-scale impact. Many of these school districts are large, complex organizations and can often be rather dysfunctional and bureaucratic. I'm sure you're not surprised to hear that that's the nature of these organizations. And they often have strong leadership at the top, but are seeking additional management talent to drive forward some of their reform strategies. And we place residents within these school districts to help lead and manage initiatives will help these organizations turn around or transform. A few years later, we started placing residents at charter management organizations, or CMOs as they're commonly known. Like school districts, these organizations operate public schools, but they're a much smaller network of schools. Additionally, while they're publicly funded, they have more autonomy and flexibility in how they operate versus a school district. And this allows them to become little incubators for exciting programs and interesting new methods in education reform. And what we've seen, a lot of the lessons have come out of CMOs that the districts are learning from and starting to implement as well. And where we place residents are in high-performing CMOs in order to help those organizations grow and ultimately scale and replicate the successes that they've had. And a few years ago, we began placing residents at the policy level, at the state and federal departments of education. So while these organizations don't directly operate schools, they create the environment and the context within which both school districts and CMOs operate. And we place residents in departments of education in states where there's exciting work happening at that policy level. And so they're there to support and drive reform down at the school level as well. So taking a look at the most recent cohort to get a sense for where residents are currently working, you'll notice here that about half of them are in districts, a little less than a third are in CMOs, and the remainder are in state departments of education. So this mix really allows for a pretty dynamic cohort experience as residents are able to get a glimpse into work being done in a large cross-section of organizations. So now let's talk about this a little bit more, and I'll dive more into the work that residents have done at these different types of organizations, and I'll give you an example from each of these different types. So we'll start off with work at a district. So Christine Leon was placed at San Francisco Unified School District when she was a resident. And when she started at San Francisco Unified, the IT department was having significant challenges. And this was affecting many of the tools that teachers relied on and the resources that students could access. So Christine was tasked with finding a way to improve the IT project management of the organization. So when she started this work, she found significant challenges facing the IT department and its operations. The department had taken on additional projects, taken on several projects in recent years with pretty poor results. And partially this was due to a lack of focus and inconsistent decision-making. And this was not only disheartening to the students, to the employees, but also to the community. Additionally, there was little communication about projects between the central office departments. And you add to this looming business budget cuts, and you can see that the situation was pretty bleak. They were projecting 10% cuts for the next fiscal year and 15% in the following year. So Christine took many steps to address these challenges. First, she worked to really understand the history of IT projects at the district and define the challenges and desired outcomes by gathering feedback from many stakeholders. She increased communication with regular meetings, a communication advisory group, and as well establishing valuable feedback loops. She standardized process, language, and a set of tools for IT project management. And finally, she conducted professional development for the IT managers and senior management so that both groups knew how to develop project sponsorship and the roles necessary for each project. So none of these strategies were groundbreaking, but rather she strategically worked to build relationships and gain buy-in that allowed her to apply some of the best practices from her time as a consultant and a project manager to the context of this district. In the end, she took these improvements and was able to establish an IT project management office. And this office aligned the district resources and their priorities so that their work was more operationally efficient and tied directly to student outcomes. And even in an environment that had fewer resources and budget cuts, they were able to do more by focusing in on what was truly essential to their goals. So Christina is now applying the lessons that she learned, now in Nashville, Tennessee at the Achievement School District, where she's leading the implementation of the school's accountability, assessment administration, and quality assurance efforts. So now let's look at some work that's done that one of our residents did at a CMO. So Delano Ford was a resident at KIPP New Orleans. KIPP, like many other CMOs, is rapidly growing, and Delano's work was to lay the groundwork so that KIPP could grow from 5 to 12 schools in New Orleans while maintaining academic success. While KIPP New Orleans had been successful academically, they had some challenges with their school operations, particularly as they were growing and adding new schools. When Delano started at KIPP New Orleans, he found that all the schools were operating independently. Each had their own systems and protocols. As well, there was a duplication of roles, a lot of miscommunication between teams within the schools, and as well between the schools and the central office. And he found that none of the training in the organization was standardized. So Delano took several steps to address these challenges. He assessed the current operational conditions, and he realized that a critical step would be to consolidate the business functions into a centralized support center. And by doing this, it would allow the schools to focus on what they did best, which was educating students. He standardized staff onboarding, training, and development, and he improved and introduced new communication tools for the business and the academic teams. Again, these solutions may seem straightforward to you, and they are, but the real challenge in Delano's role was improving and streamlining the operations while the schools were operating and continuing to grow. So imagine trying to build a plane while it's in flight. Delano's ability to build strong relationships and navigate the organization were crucial to his success. As a result, in his second year, KIPP New Orleans grew to 7 schools and are well on their way of their goal to serve 13% of the students in New Orleans. So Delano's success was important to KIPP, not only important to him, but also to KIPP, and it was a great experience for him. In his second year as a resident, he was promoted from Director of Operations to Chief Operating Officer, and he continued to serve KIPP as COO for a few years after his residency. In 2011, he took on the role at the Louisiana Recovery School District and is now the Deputy Superintendent of Services and is taking the lessons that he learned about serving charter schools at KIPP and applying that to all charter schools across New Orleans. And finally, I have one more example, and this one is one of our residents who's working at one of our policy partners. So Larkin Tackett is a recent alumnus of the Broad Residency, and during his residency, he was placed at the U.S. Department of Ed. And during this time, he worked on an initiative called Promise Neighborhoods. Promise Neighborhoods is based on Geoffrey Canada's Harlem Children's Zone concept. And the premise of this model is that in some communities, education is not enough for children to fully develop. Some children need not only a strong academic system, but also additional support from the cradle to college by providing health services, parenting classes, early childhood development, etc. There's establishing more of a holistic approach. But this holistic community approach is not a model that would be effective everywhere, but it is an approach that the federal government is interested in replicating, interested in learning more about to figure out if it is something that, in fact, can be replicated. And this is the initiative that he oversaw. So as a resident, Larkin managed $10 million in planning grants. And that meant that he worked with educators and policymakers across the nation to develop program guidelines and a competitive process for awarding grants. Rather than just giving grants, Larkin and his team created a process where organizations would submit proposals and the best ones would receive funding. He also worked on the design of the implementation framework and managed the peer review grant award process. So this process included peer review. So Larkin was not the one who decided which groups had the best ideas, but rather a peer group of community and educational leaders who really understood this work. They were the ones that evaluated and determined the proposals that would be funded. In the end, $10 million in planning grants went to the winning organizations in this process. And in 2011, $200 million in grants were awarded for organizations to implement their Promised Neighborhood plans. So currently, Larkin is leading a CMO in Austin, Texas called Idea Public Schools. And he's applying the lessons that he learned about community engagement and running a multi-million-dollar initiative to the work that he's doing in Austin. So I certainly encourage you to spend some time on our website where you can find day-in-the-life journals from some of our current residents, and as well leadership profiles from some of our alumni. So I shared with you just a few stories, but you can certainly find out a lot more about this work through our website. So there's three main benefits to doing this work in education as a Broad resident that I'll talk about next. So the first benefit of doing this work is really the professional development that we provide. So while working full-time at one of our partner organizations, residents participate in a 2-year comprehensive professional development training program. Most residents are transitioning from careers outside of education, so this program is really important as it allows them to get up to speed more quickly as they benefit from a shared learning experience with their cohort. So at the core of this programming are 8 quarterly sessions, and these sessions take place in cities across the country where really innovative ed reform initiatives are in practice, and each one is about 2.5 to 3 days long. These sessions include case studies, guest speakers. I know you thought that your coursework was over as you finished up your graduate degree, but no, there's more homework, there's more assigned readings, small group work, school site visits, and perhaps the greatest value of these PD sessions are the opportunity to share best practices with your peers. So coming together, really looking at the work that's being done across different functional areas and as well as across different organizations. So coming together makes for a really rich shared learning experience. And as well, the sessions are designed to provide our residents with the context to work in public education. So at the core of that content is the opportunity to develop an understanding and the foundations of urban education. What's the history of urban ed in the U.S.? What are the current trends and best practices? As well, residents explore the strategic levers of change. Is it finance, HR, culture? How do you make an organization change? How do you lead that process? So learning how to drive organizational change is another core component of the curriculum. And then finally, all of our residents receive personalized leadership development. Excuse me. So just to dive into that a little bit more, I talked a little bit about how the professional development sessions are at the core of this programming. But over the course of the 2 years, our residents receive additional support, many different components of additional support. So residents are part of a peer advisory team, and this is similar to study groups that you might be familiar with. This is a group of 4 to 5 residents who are in similar functional roles. In between those sessions, they meet virtually. A lot of them are using Google Hangout these days to get together. And this is a way for them to share best practices and discuss the specific challenges they're facing on a day-to-day basis in their work. At the end of both of their years, at the end of the first year and the second year, residents participate in a 360-degree evaluation. And this is a time when they get anonymous feedback from 11 to 20 coworkers. And this is an opportunity to get really honest and very valuable feedback. So residents will really get a good idea of how they're perceived, what their strengths are, and as well their opportunities for further development. That information is shared then with the executive coach that they receive in their second year. And this coach is focused on that resident, really helping them to dive into that feedback, understand how to make it actionable, and how to also think about what their long-term career looks like in this space. So this is a really important part and something that of the program and something that our residents really do value. As well, residents have access to a staff advisor, and this is someone on our team who has worked with residents over the years and can really help them navigate not only the program but also their position. And finally, residents have access to our alumni, and our alumni are available to provide guidance, advice, and mentorship as needed. So as you can see, there are many levels of personalized support that we provide our residents with the overall goal of helping them to successfully transition into a career in education. So another benefit, a second benefit of entering into this work through the residency is the national network. And we have a nationwide network of leaders in education. So take a moment here to look at the slide, and you'll see we have over 265 alumni and residents who are out there. If you notice, the circles represent the number of residents in that location. And the larger the circle, the larger the number of people in that area. We've been around now for over 10 years, and we have alumni working in 116 education organizations in more than 40 cities across the country. So what does this mean? This means that as a resident, you're immediately a part of this nationwide network. And we find that residents leverage that network throughout their career, throughout the residency, but also over time, post-career, as they're looking to explore different career opportunities in the future, and as they're just looking to have access to this rich group of thought leaders. So that's really what the benefit of this network is. And as I mentioned before, our overall goal for the Broad Center is really to build this nationwide network of leaders. So we're really excited to see that we have a nice footprint across this nation. So what happens after the residency? The 2 years that I talked about before really defines the professional development programming, not the job placement. So residents are full-time employees of their placement organization, and about 80% of those residents stay at their placement organization after they complete the program. Over time, about 90% of our alums we found that continue to work in K-12 and drive change in a wide range of organizations. So I'll pause here for a moment to allow you to take a look at the graph and to really see where people are working. As you'll see, most alumni remain in districts, CMOs, and departments of education. There are many other organizations in this space who are also doing great work. We find that 23% of them are still working in places outside of the district CMOs and departments of education. And some of this 23% includes foundations such as the Dell and Gates Foundation, Teach for America, Colin Powell's America's Promise Alliance, and for-profit companies in this space that are delivering innovative services to school systems. But what's important to note here is that residents found that their experience and their training in the Broad Residency provided them with a strong foundation and was a really great launching pad for them to have a fulfilling career in public education. So it talks a lot about building that network. So certainly having that 90% of people still in the space is really important to that goal. And then finally, the last benefit is the continued support that we provide for our alumni over time. So once the resident becomes an alumni of a program, that we have a team here that delivers alumni services. I'll highlight a few rather quickly. First is the Activate Ed Exchange. And this is a knowledge networking system that connects the networks of the Broad Center with Education Pioneers and Strategic Data Project. And it allows all of our networks to share knowledge and collaborate on similar projects. So education is not one of those industries where people are, like technology, where people feel very proprietary, are holding on to the knowledge that they have and they don't want other people to know. Education is about collaboration. So if one organization, if one person finds something that works, they're eager to share that out with others and see others replicate that success and learn. This initiative is funded by the Gates Foundation, and is really an exciting initiative for us, for those three organizations to come together, because we all have the same mission, to transform education by supplying top leaders and managers and analysts to this field. We also support our alumni with continued career support, so they can have a long-lasting career in education. And our alumni have access to job postings and some additional counseling from our staff on job opportunities. We also have various networking events for our alumni, and these not only allow them to connect with one another, but also an opportunity and a forum to come together to discuss relevant and timely education topics and continue to push the thinking and this important work in the space. And then finally, we have a monthly newsletter that has featured news stories and information about the work of our network. So I'll talk briefly about our selection process. So it all begins with the resume. So submit your resume, and that gets the whole process going. We do this on a rolling basis through February 7th. The resume, the application, and the first round interview, those all take place on a rolling basis. The second round interview, that does take place in either February or March. And these are a full interview day when you come out and meet with our team, have a series of interviews and case exercises, etc. So throughout this process, we're collecting information through the resume, application, and first round interview. We're collecting information from you about what regions you're interested in, just to get a sense for the geographic demand. But by the time you come to second round, you have a chance to look at the actual job description. So you're really the one that's driving what roles you're interested in. We don't decide where you work. We don't place you there. You're definitely driving that decision. So you're looking at the job descriptions. You're indicating to us which you're most interested in, and then we go through a matching process, and we decide maybe we match you with 1 to 2 of those organizations that or roles that you're most interested in. And those interviews with the partner organizations who ultimately make the hiring decision, that takes place in April or May. Our orientation is in July, and that's around the time frame that our residents will start their new positions at our partner organizations. So with that, we're going to pause. I'm going to bring Chaka on, and we're going to take some live Q&A. So hi, Chaka. You want to say hi to everyone?
Hey, Dana. How's it going?
All right. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for running this. So it looks like there's a couple questions here that have been submitted. Feel free to type in your questions now if you've been holding them or as they come up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to unmute the people who ask some of these questions. And just a heads up, sometimes when I unmute you, it doesn't work. So I'll unmute you, and if it doesn't work, then I'll just kind of read your question and paraphrase it and ask it myself. The first question I'm going to start with is from Camille. So Camille had a pretty good question around kind of progression. So Camille, I'm going to try to unmute you now to see if this works. Camille, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. So you had a good question, and it was a little bit long, so I didn't want to just read it. I figured maybe you could just go ahead and ask it, and then I'll be able to answer it for you.
Sure. It sounds like a lot of the functions, and I'm speaking specifically for residents who want to go into the school district. It sounds like a lot of the functions are similar to what a school district business leader or official would do. And I know to have those certain roles in districts in some states, it requires you to have specific certification. And I was wondering if after the residency program, if there are supports built in to help residents obtain that certification, and if not, I just wanted to learn more about your experience with that.
Yep, definitely. It's a really good question. I'm going to put you on mute so you know, because sometimes there's background noise, but thank you for that question, Camille. So it's a good question because that is one of the hurdles that residents face as they move upward in this work. They usually don't place right after the residency. So they've got to still able to navigate without potentially hitting a place where they have to have a master's in ed or certification. So the main thing we can do on our end is, so we don't provide any support in terms of helping people get certified. Like we're happy to talk to people individually to talk to them about what is the process to get certified. We have had residents who have gone on to get master's degrees or master's in education on their own because they thought it would be helpful. But primarily what we do is help them navigate to figure out, okay, if you want to get to this type of role, is this the organization where you can stay in? Is this organization very traditional and you're not going to get there unless you get the certification, and that might take too long or require something that you don't want to do? And if so, what does that mean? You have to move from one organization to another. So even though it's a hurdle, I would not say it's not a major hurdle. It's not something that a lot of our residents face. I think that's like 2 reasons. So one is most of them work in organizations or end up working in organizations that are maybe a little bit less traditional or a little bit more open to people from the outside being able to work their way up. The other thing come in on the business side, and that's where they're
Taka, we lost you a little bit there. Can you repeat the last sentence there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Just let me know if I fade out. Well, there's the business side.
Uh-oh, we're losing you again.
You losing me again?
Yeah, okay, there you go.
All right, I'm not sure what's going on. Yeah, just let me know if I fade out. In short, if you want to move to the academic side, you may face that issue. But we will help you navigate it. The other thing that I mentioned is we are in the process of working towards becoming accredited, which would mean that if you get through the Broad Residency, you actually will have a Master's in Education degree, which one of the reasons we're doing that is so that just with kind of one sweep, people can go through our program and we can eliminate that hurdle for the most part. So that's in the works. It's a long process, but it's something we're kind of proactively doing. Hopefully that helped. It's kind of a long-winded answer, but hopefully that helped. All right. I got some more questions coming in here. There's one from Trina Gillum. Trina, I'm going to unmute you, and it looks like one that Dina can answer for you. So let me see if I can unmute you, Trina. Give me a second here.
Yep.
All right, Trina, you there?
Yes.
Great. You have a question about placement cities?
Yes, I did. I wanted to know for placement, once you put in your application, can you request to remain in your area or your city if the broad residency is offered in your area?
Mm-hmm. Great. So thank you for your question. We're going to definitely meet you again so we don't have the background noise. So I'll answer this a little bit more broad because I did see a couple of the people ask about placement. So as I mentioned, as you progress to the second round, you're looking, at that point in time, you have job descriptions to look for. So really Broad isn't sort of going to organizations and saying, hey, we have someone who we think you should hire. We're really working more in collaboration with them, so they have a need. So let's say, San Jose Unified School District needs a director of finance. And so that is really what we're helping them to find someone for that particular role. They have to come put together a proposal with the scoping out the work that they have in mind for that person, but really sort of it all comes down to what that organization needs. So we're helping those organizations to grow, to turn around, to grow and scale, so whatever their specific concern is. So after the second round interview, you look at the job descriptions and you get a form where you can allocate points towards the role that you're most interested in. So you'll allocate those points, kind of like when you're in school and you sort of were bidding for classes, very similar process. So if we take that information, so now you have an idea of where you prioritize, which organizations and roles you're most interested in. You'll have a conversation with someone on our placement team to discuss that further. So we'll have a conversation. We'll talk more about that. We'll see if you're flexible geographically. I know that was another question someone had. So yes, the more flexible you are geographically, probably the more opportunities that you would consider. But we certainly do have residents who have homes and families are not able to move from a city, and so then therefore their focus just is more narrow. Their search is more narrow, and they would only focus on the opportunities in that particular city. So I hope that kind of addresses the question with regards to the flexibility. But yes, so if you were in Chicago and you only wanted to be in Chicago, then that is really where you would focus your search on and apply for and put in your points towards opportunities within that particular location.
And then someone else had a similar question around is the placement decided more on the candidate's preference or the skill set? Or the skill set needs of the specific location, and it's a little bit of both for that question. I mean, it's definitely driven by the candidate preference in terms of what Dina just described. We give you a bunch of information. You figure out which roles seem most appealing to you, which ones seems like they might be a fit for you, what you either want to do or can do, and then we have to see on our end, is that a fit for the organization and what they need. So those two things go hand in hand. So hopefully that answered your question out there. I think it's Kaysen or Kassan Davis asked that question. All right, let's go to another question here, maybe on a different angle, and maybe I'll answer this one. I'll see if I can unmute you. This is from Marissa Wilcox. So Marissa, I'll try to unmute you. Let's see if this works. Marissa, are you there?
Yes, I am. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Good.
So you want me to just speak my question?
Yeah.
All right. So I happen to have a few friends who work in education. And so I asked them, and one is an assistant principal, and another person works in policy, another in research and kind of survey methods. And I asked if they'd heard about this program. And I got some mixed reactions. It seemed, though, that a lot of folks either themselves or said, well, I don't necessarily view the broad residency program this way, but a lot of people do, that it's pushing a kind of privatization and management-focused agenda versus traditional education. And a lot of people who have educational backgrounds sound like they may feel a little bit resentful when they're working with someone who comes, from a completely different background.
Yep. Yep.
So I was just wondering.
Yeah, no, great question.
No, it is. No, it's a good one because it's very real, and it's true. So I'm going to mute you, Marissa, just so you know, so there's no background noise. But thank you for asking that question, bringing it up. I think so. Here's what I would recommend any of you do if you want to get a real view of get both sides of how we're viewed. Is just go on to Google or Bing or whatever your search engine is, and Google Eli Broad and the word education. And you will see blogs that are very, very anti-Broad. And there are people that think we are trying to privatize education, which I can tell you, having worked here for 7 years, product of public education myself, went to LA Unified, Los Angeles Unified my whole life. That's not what we do. But there is that perception out there. It's driven by a small group of folks, particularly in the blogosphere, that think that anytime you have someone coming in who's a billionaire, who's talking about management, that means there must be something profit-driven behind it. And there really is nothing profit-driven here, and there's no privatization that's going on. So that's the first thing I want to clarify, but I definitely say go look it up yourself, and you'll see a little bit of what you're getting into. Marissa's question is good, is because that environment exists in some cities more than others, residents do go into an environment where they're not necessarily welcome. They are viewed as outsiders. They're viewed as folks who don't know, they haven't taught for the most part, and they're now working with people who are former teachers or former principals, and they view them with a little bit of mistrust. There's probably two things actually that we do. So one is we pick people. So maybe three things. One is we're very open about this, like I'm being now, so people don't go into this disillusion. But two is we pick people who have the right personality and the right interpersonal skills to deal with that. People who know that they have to go into this work with a lot of humility. They have to go in asking questions, not giving answers. They can't go in thinking that a PowerPoint and an Excel spreadsheet is going to solve everything. They have to value the people that are already there and have been trying to solve these issues for a long time. So on our selection end, we're looking for people who can go into that environment and figure out how to work with folks who may initially be a little bit worried about why they're there. And I think the third thing is that's what a big part of the training program itself, the 2 years of support, is about helping people make that transition into a very new environment where some of those issues exist. So it does happen. It happens at varying levels. I guarantee you every resident at some point in the 2 years has dealt with it. Some of them very low degree of it. Others maybe daily initially as they're trying to figure it out and navigate their way through an organization. This is non-traditional. Trying to bring in people from the outside into this sector is non-traditional. Most organizations, most districts are very traditional. People work their way up inside the organization, and I think there's a lot of power in that because you have really smart people who've been in the classroom who can work their way up and figure out how to fix things. But it also means that there aren't a lot of new ideas coming in. It makes it tougher for best practices from other regions, cities, industries to come in. So this approach really tries to leverage that. So thanks for that question, Marissa.
One thing I would add to that, just in talking to residents, how they approach it. So I think that the difference is that they know that they don't have a lot of the education background, but what they do have is just really good management skills. And so I think so they have to figure out, number one, how to have those conversations. Sort of that onboarding is really important to make sure that the organization, that they build credibility and get to know people and build relationships, and not try to come, and their position is not to come in as the expert, but really leveraging the experts, helping the experts to do their jobs more effectively. So we're really looking to support teachers, support principals so that they can do the work that they do best, so they don't have to worry about finance and are the books going to be in the classroom, are the doors going to be open, and so forth. So that's the role that the residents are looking to fill.
Yep. Okay, there's another question here from Christine. I'm going to try to unmute you, Christine. It looks like you have a question around geographic flexibility. So, Christine, are you there?
I tried to address that one, so hopefully we've got to it. Let's see.
Hello?
Hi, Christine.
Okay. So in short, Christine just said, like, if you don't have geographic flexibility, does that affect you? Short answer is we don't cut anyone from our process because they have to stay in where they live, unless we're not placing in where they live. Like if you say, I have to be in Hawaii, and we're not placing in Hawaii, we'll let you know that up front so you don't waste your time. Otherwise, we'll move you through the process, and if there's a place in there that matches you, then we're happy to try to get you connected there. All right, let's move on to another question.
And we did have a question from somebody who asked if we placed in Hawaii, so.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, if you're listening, unfortunately, we're not placing in Hawaii, and all of us wish we could place in Hawaii because we're trying to find a reason to go there and recruit and pretend like we're working. But, yeah, unfortunately, we're not in Hawaii yet. Okay, question from Brian Thompson. Brian, I'll try to unmute you, and I'll answer your question for you. Brian, are you there? Nope, Brian? Okay. Brian had this question. I'll read it and then answer it. So Brian's question is, do most residents stay with the district or organization where they worked, or are there opportunities to connect with organizations in other geographical areas at the end of the residency? So most residents do stay. I think it's somewhere around at least 80%. It depends on the year, but let's say about 80% of them stay with the same organization at the 2-year mark, and they continue to work there for a couple years at least. But there's always about 20% that move on for various reasons, and that opportunity does exist. We start talking to residents about their plans at the end of the 2 years during their 2nd year, so that we have enough space that if they're going to leave, we can help them figure out where do they want to go. Do they want to switch, from a district to a charter, or a charter to a district? Do they need to go to another geography? We have a team called Network Services, which is kind of like alumni services that works with residents, particularly during the 2nd year, to try to figure out what's the path after the 2 years so that there's a relatively smooth transition. So hopefully that answers your question. Let's see if there's any other questions here. That we've got about 3 minutes.
I think Bajal has a good question. If you can grab him and answer that one, Bajal Desai Ramirez.
Is it okay? Give me 1 second. Hang on a second. All right, Bajal. That name sounds really familiar. Bajal, are you there? Maybe not. Hang on. Let's see if I can unmute you. Bajal, are you there?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. How are you?
Oh, great. Okay, I didn't think I had a microphone.
Yep.
So my question, the example that you gave of Delano's project sounded very similar to what's happening locally in St. Louis, where I am. KIPP Schools recently opened a location in St. Louis, and they're planning to expand, but they don't have staff identified to do so. I know that you guys aren't currently partnered with them, so I was wondering how you guys go about partnering with new organizations, or if there's some way I can link them to Broad for a specific opportunity and then in turn fill that opportunity through the residency. Do you guys ever do that?
Yep. So 2 thoughts. One is I think we've met before, right? I remember your name from, it's been a couple years though. Is that right?
Yep, it's Beetle. It has been a couple of years. I've been stuck in St. Louis, and you guys don't work with the St. Louis Public Schools anymore. So.
Yeah, I know, it's been a while. We placed there maybe in our 2nd or 3rd year or something like that, and then it went a little crazy out there.
Yeah.
So glad
Things
to see
are
you
getting
still.
better, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. Well, not thank you, but I hope so. So number one, glad you're still interested in this work. The way it works is we reach out to organizations and invite them to apply, and KIPP is a national organization, so we generally kind of reach out to them nationally and see if there's certain regions that they want us to try to partner with, et cetera. You could always shoot us an email. If you still have my email address, feel free to shoot me an email if there's someone there that you'd like us to consider, and I can pass that on to the person on our team who works with organizations, and he'll kind of add it to his list. That's really the shortest process. People do reach out to us. We do a lot of outreach, and there's a person on our team that kind of manages that whole process. But my email address is cb@broadcenter, so feel free to just shoot me an email if you have an organization you want us to take a look at, and I'm happy to pass that on. Good to
I wrote that down as well.
Okay, let's see. We have 1 minute, and let's see if there's a question here that can be answered in 1 minute. There's some really good questions in here. Sorry, we're not going to be able to get to all of them. Let's see.
Oh, I like this one. So I see Ryan Perry has a question. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to, let's not unmute him. We can just answer it, though, because I think that that's a really important one. So Ryan's question is, from our experience, what are some of the common traits, skills, backgrounds that successful residents possess? So there's 3 things that we really look for. We know that, I mentioned we do a lot of 360, so we have a lot of information about our residents and what does make them successful. So 3 things I'll point out really quickly. First is project management skills. The second is navigation. So these are very complex organizations, often working as an outsider coming in. Navigation skills are really important to help to figure out how to effectively enter these organizations and drive work forward. And then the third one, I think, is something that we touched on at the beginning, is the passion. This is pretty tough work, and so finding residents who are passionate and personally driven to do this work, that really helps to sustain them through some of those challenges and really helps them to push forward and to believe that they can, in fact, make change within this system, and that all children can learn and so forth. So that passion is something that is really key, something we find in all of our residents and is really key to their success. So I'll just boil it down to those 3 things: passion, project management, and navigation.
Yep. Well, good. It sounds like we're out of time. Do you want to wrap it up, Dina?
All right, great. Thanks, Taka. So thank you all so much for joining us today. This has been a really great session. We've enjoyed your questions, and we're excited that you want to learn more about how you can join this organization. We have a pretty strong reputation in this space, and it's allowed us to really connect with some great people like all of you on the call. We ask you to spread the word. Maybe you heard about this from a friend or colleague or got an email from us or someone else told you about it. So continue to spread the word. That's how most people find out about us. And we believe that everyone knows the future Broad residents, so certainly do help us in that effort to bring top talent to this space. We're growing. This year we're looking to bring in a cohort of about 51 people who have experience in a wide range of industries and functional area. And we hope that you've been inspired today to submit your resume. But if not, we encourage you to act on whatever sparked this interest and drove you to listen to this session today. I encourage you to act on that. Find a way to get involved. Find a way to mentor a child or consult for an organization that needs your skills and your experience. There's a lot of work to be done. And hopefully all together, if we all are engaged in this, we will, in fact, drive better outcomes for children. And that's really, I think, the most important endeavor that we could possibly do. I'm overstating it maybe, but I'm going to say it anyway. That's how I feel. And hopefully you feel that way too. So thank you for joining us today.